It looks like Lula will not be on the ballot in October.
Welcome to Plain English, the podcast that goes at the right speed for English language learners. Listen now and read the transcript online at plainenglish.com. Now, here's Jeff, your host for today's episode.
The popular but controversial ex-president of Brazil was nominated as the Workers' Party candidate for the October presidential elections, but he is ineligible as a candidate under Brazilian law, says the country's electoral court. Hi everyone, I'm Jeff, and welcome to Plain English, a podcast in English for everyone who is still learning. We go nice and slow here so you can catch every word. Today is Thursday, September 6th, 2018, and this is episode 83. That means you can find a transcript of today's program at plainenglish.com/83. And like all our transcripts, it has instant translations of the most difficult words and phrases from English to Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, Italian, Chinese, and French. For every episode, the producer, JR, and I select about 100 words and phrases, expressions to highlight. Literally, we highlight them in red on the website and provide the translations into all those languages. If you are new to the program, and there are lots of new listeners, let me tell you, if you are one of the many new listeners, make sure you check out plainenglish.com/83 and have a look at the translations. Later on, in today's episode, I'll explain what the English expression in a bind means, to be in a bind. Listen for that in the first part of the program, and we'll talk more about it in the second half. Brazil's 72-year-old ex-president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who is serving a jail sentence for corruption, will not be eligible to run for president this fall, Brazil's top electoral court has ruled. The law in Brazil says that anyone who has been convicted of a crime cannot run for public office if that conviction has been upheld by an appeals court. Although the ruling was expected, it did dramatically change a pivotal race in Latin America's biggest country. Brazil is still reeling from the Operation Car Wash corruption investigation, and its current president has little public support. Lula was leading in the presidential preference polls until the most recent ruling, despite currently being in jail. He was convicted as part of the Operation Car Wash corruption investigation. He was found to have accepted a renovated beachfront apartment worth over $1 million given to him by an engineering firm. The justices on Brazil's electoral court debated for several hours, and 6 voted not to allow Lula to run, against just 1 in favor of allowing Lula's candidacy. The judge who issued the decision in the case said that what was at stake is the equality of all citizens before the law and the Constitution. One justice said the decision was very simple. Lula, for his part, has always held that his conviction was politically motivated. The Workers' Party of Brazil, which Lula represented when he was president before, said that it would fight for his candidacy by all possible means. But still, that leaves the Workers' Party in a bit of a bind. The party nominated Lula to be its candidate in the October elections just last month, when about 2,000 of the party's officials selected him. And for good reason. Presidential polls showed that he had about double the support of his next nearest rivals for the presidency. But now that he is officially ineligible to run, that majority of Brazilians will have to find a new candidate. The Workers' Party has just 10 days to replace Lula as a candidate. The party is expected to nominate former Sao Paulo Mayor Fernando Haddad, who is the current candidate for vice president, but he doesn't enjoy the same level of public support as the electric ex-president Lula does. Though Haddad has little name recognition across Brazil at this point, and enjoys only single-digit support, over 30% of Brazilians told pollsters that they would support any candidate that Lula endorsed. So the party's next job is to transfer Lula's wide support to their new candidate. However, they'll have to get creative because the ex-president will not be allowed to appear in the television commercials given for free to presidential candidates. In the absence of Lula, the race could shape up much differently as Brazilians' support would be spread thinly among a larger number of candidates. In polls that exclude Lula as an option, Jair Bolsonaro, a far-right candidate, has the most support, but only from about 20% of the people. He has a record of saying controversial things, including some things about police violence and minorities that have turned off many voters. The other main candidate is Geraldo Alckmin, who is considered a more experienced, centrist candidate with market-friendly policies. Unfortunately for him, he is considered the party of the government, the establishment, which is associated with the current government and President Michel Temer, who is unpopular. But he does have a wide coalition of smaller parties behind him. He also has some momentum. Brazil gives free commercial airtime to politicians based on their party's representation in Congress, so Alckmin's broad alliance gives him a large base of free commercial airtime to use to his advantage. If Lula is not in the race, it looks like it will be a race between Alckmin and Bolsonaro. The election will take place on October 7th. If no candidate wins 50% of the vote then, a runoff election will be on October 28th. Time to say hello to a couple of listeners. Asaka from Morocco wrote to say he understands everything on the program, but just in case there's something he doesn't get, he checks out the transcripts. That's a good way to do it, Asaka, And thanks for listening all the way from Africa. I also want to say hi to Paolo, who is from Italy, but is now living in Australia. And another hello to Adrian from Mexico City. He's studying English at UNAM, the big university there in Mexico City. If you are interested in practicing a little more with each episode, you might want to sign up for the Plain English emails. Each Monday and Thursday, I send out an email summary of the program. I also include the definition of one more word or phrase from the episode. And I include links to the English articles that I use to prepare the show. So if you learn about a topic on Plain English and you'd like to practice a little more with that same topic, you can click the links to read news articles in English. Today's email features links to articles from the BBC and the Los Angeles Times, for example, which I used to research the recent court ruling against Lula's candidacy. If that sounds like it would be of interest to you, just go to plainenglish.com/mail, plainenglish.com/mail, and enter your details. Today's expression is to be in a bind. What does it mean to be in a bind? When you are in a bind, you are in a difficult situation. Brazil's Workers' Party, you heard earlier, is in a bind because they chose Lula as their candidate last month, and now he's not allowed to be a candidate. So they have to choose another candidate within 10 days. And the problem for them is that the election is in about 5 weeks. It always seemed likely that Lula would be barred from running. So you might even say that the Workers' Party put itself in this bind. They could have nominated another candidate from the beginning. They put themselves in this difficult situation. It's common to say you're in a bind if you're in a difficult social or business situation. For example, I'm in a bind because I have a meeting in Chicago this Thursday night, but I also have to be in Houston during the day for meetings for work. So I either have to fly home early or miss the meeting back here. I'm in a bind or I'm in a difficult situation because the meeting in Chicago was scheduled a long time ago and I said I would be there. It's a bit of a bind, but I think I'll try to attend the meeting by phone from the Houston airport. A bind is a difficult situation, but not a terrible or tragic one. It's usually something that's kind of bad and which would cause either inconvenience or embarrassment. If your house burns down and you lose all your possessions, you would not say you're in a bind, for example. But if your rent is due on the 1st of the month, but you're not getting paid until the 5th of the month, then you could say you're in a bind. You'll either have to pay your rent late or borrow money from friends. If your car breaks down in Chicago, you can always take the bus. But if you're in Houston, where I'm going this week, then you'd be in a bind since they don't have a bus and train system there like we have in Chicago. You would have to find some other way to get around. That's it for today. Thanks so much for listening, for being part of Plain English. JR and I are very appreciative of your kind words, and we love hearing from you. You can connect with us on Facebook or Twitter at Plain English Pod. And of course, send us a note. I'm Jeff, Jeff, at plainenglish.com. And JR is JR at plainenglish.com. The next episode will come out on Monday. The topic on Monday's episode will be daylight saving time and how a majority of Europeans are in favor of abolishing it.